I am Gavin Blake, 29 years old. Last night, my own brother punched me in the face and dragged me out by my hair in front of 70 people at his corporate award party. While I was bleeding on the floor, my mother just smiled, took a sip of her wine, and muttered that I should just handle things quietly like an adult. But there is one massive secret they did not know. They thought my military discipline meant I would stay quiet and protect the family image. They were dead wrong. Before I show you how their entire million-dollar empire came crashing down with a single phone call, hit that like button if you believe in justice, and tell me where you are watching from in the comments below. Now, let us go back to where it all began. I was standing in the cold, sterile bathroom of the Riverstone Hotel, staring at my reflection like the man looking back at me was a complete stranger. My bottom lip was badly split, and a thick smear of dark blood ran across my front teeth. My scalp throbbed with a white-hot agony where entire clumps of my hair had just been ripped out by the roots. The collar of my white button-down shirt was completely torn open, stained with dark smudges from where my chest had slammed hard against the marble floor. The harsh overhead fluorescent light made every single detail look worse, sharper, and far more real than I wanted it to be. Just outside those heavy double doors, 70 people were still sipping expensive champagne, laughing loudly, and toasting my older brother, Preston Blake. To the rest of the world, Preston was America's newest tech golden boy, the pioneering face of veteran-adjacent innovation, and a brilliant visionary. To me, he was a thief and a coward who had just assaulted his younger brother in front of a room full of wealthy angel investors, high-profile politicians, and childhood friends, acting like it was all just a minor glitch in the evening script. The worst part of it all was the complete absence of help. When Preston snapped and attacked me, most of the guests just stood there, frozen in place with their glasses raised, watching the spectacle like it was a live performance. My mother, Beatrice, did not blink. She did not yell for him to stop. She just adjusted her pearl necklace, smiled her polished political smile, and took a delicate sip of her Chardonnay. And one older woman standing near the catering table, God help her soul, actually had the audacity to whisper to her husband that I probably deserved it. Let me take you back a little bit so you can understand how a decorated Marine ended up bleeding in a luxury hotel bathroom. I did not even want to attend this ridiculous gala. I had just returned to the mainland after spending 6 grueling months stationed at a remote facility in Hawaii. My body was exhausted, my mind was drained, and all I craved was one single week of civilian peace. I wanted a week without military protocol, a week without checking urgent emails from command, and a week where I did not have to pretend I was okay with random people treating my active duty service uniform like a charity case at the local Walmart. But then the invitation arrived at my temporary quarters. It was printed on heavy cream cardstock with thick gold foil trim. It read, Preston Blake, founder and chief executive officer of Radiant Arc, Tech Pioneer of the Year. Join us for an exclusive celebration of vision, leadership, and sacrifice. And right there at the very bottom of the card, my name, Gavin, was scribbled in messy blue ballpoint ink. It was a complete, sloppy afterthought. Beneath my name, someone had written, Love, Mom. I almost tossed it straight into the trash can. My instinct told me to stay away, to guard my peace, and to remain at the base. But there is a stupid, blindly loyal, and maybe even masochistic part of me that still wanted a family. That quiet whisper in my gut said, maybe this time, just maybe, they will finally act like real parents. Maybe they will look at my uniform, look at my accomplishments, and treat me like a son who matters. So, I packed a single duffel bag, booked a last-minute flight to Denver, and went straight from the airport tarmac to the hotel venue. I did not even stop by my childhood home. Not that I really wanted to see it anyway. The Riverstone ballroom was just as over-the-top, loud, and arrogant as Preston himself. There were gold-plated chairs, massive floral centerpieces that looked like wedding arches, and endless rows of servers wearing tailored tuxedos passing around expensive canapes that nobody in the room could actually pronounce. I slipped into the crowd quietly, hugging the perimeter wall, trying to blend into the shadows. I was not expecting a red carpet rollout for myself, but I thought I might get a simple, warm greeting from my parents. I was mistaken. My mother was far too busy on her self-styled political smile tour, shaking hands with local county officials and talking about her family's deep roots in the community. My father, Harrison, was exactly where I expected him to be, which was nowhere. He had claimed an urgent business conflict regarding his insurance firm, but we all knew he just did not have the spine to stand in a room where Preston was the center of attention. And then there was Preston. He was holding court right in the dead center of the ballroom, glowing under the crystal chandeliers like he had personally invented the entire internet. He wore a custom-tailored suit that cost more than my annual military salary, laughing that specific practice laugh he always does when he knows influential people are watching him. I waited patiently for the initial wave of applause to die down, and then I slowly made my way toward the back of the room where the formal gift table was set up. I placed my offering down gently on the white tablecloth. It was a framed, meticulously restored photograph of the two of us as young kids, taken long before the family dynamics went completely sideways and before the corporate greed consumed our lives. I had actually spent hours working on that restoration, hoping it would spark a genuine memory of brotherhood. Wow, Preston's voice boomed right behind my shoulder. I certainly did not expect you to show your face tonight, little brother. I turned around slowly to face him. I did not expect to be invited, either, I replied, keeping my voice level and controlled. Preston's corporate smile remained plastered onto his face, but his eyes were completely ice-cold. Mom insisted, he purred, crossing his arms over his chest. She said it would be incredibly good public relations for the firm. You know how it is, Gavin. We have to maintain the whole traditional family values image for the new venture capital board. He reached down, picked up the restored photograph, and glanced at it with the same level of interest he would give a crumpled grocery receipt from a gas station. Then, he dropped it back onto the table without saying a single word of thanks. Just try not to make a scene tonight, Gavin, Preston hissed, leaning in closer so the nearby investors could not hear his tone. We both know you have a very long, volatile history of acting out. I let out a short, sharp laugh. A history of what, Preston? Breathing too loud at the Thanksgiving dinner table? Not clapping hard enough when you won most likely to succeed back in the 8th grade? Or maybe it is the fact that I do not care about your stock options. For a fraction of a second, his perfect, media-trained smile cracked. It was just a tiny, hairline fracture of frustration, but for a Marine trained to spot weakness in a target, it was more than enough. He leaned in even further, his breath smelling of expensive scotch. You always had this pathetic, jealous little streak in you, Gavin, he whispered, his voice dripping with venom. It is honestly sad. You act like joining the military and playing soldier boy makes you better than the rest of this family. You think that uniform gives you leverage over me? I looked him dead in the eye, the words burning hot in my throat. I did not join the Marine Corps to be better than you, Preston, I said, matching his low whisper. I joined the Marine Corps to get away from you and the rest of this toxic house. And just like that, the golden boy completely snapped. 1 second he was the poised, elegant tech founder. The very next second, his right hand shot forward like a piston, cracking heavily across the left side of my face with a force that made the entire crowded ballroom instantly fall dead silent. Before my brain could even register the sharp sting on my jaw, Preston grabbed a handful of my hair, yanked my head down, and began dragging me violently toward the heavy wooden double doors of the hallway. I tripped over a decorative velvet rope, caught my balance, and tripped again as he continued to pull me forward. The sharp heels of his designer shoes clicked like gunshots against the polished marble floor. Nobody in that room of 70 distinguished guests said a single damn word to stop him. I heard a few sharp gasps, a couple of uncomfortable, nervous laughs from the back, and maybe one person mumbled a weak plea for Preston to stop. But it was the kind of pathetic murmur people make just so they can tell themselves later that they tried to intervene. As we passed the massive, 4-tier celebration cake table, my own mother calmly stepped to the side to let her golden child pass through with his victim. He started it, Preston muttered over his shoulder, his voice suddenly sounding like a defensive 12-year-old child caught stealing cookies. My mother did not ask what happened. She did not look at my bleeding mouth. She just maintained her serene smile, adjusted her grip on her wine glass, and took another slow sip. Preston flung me out into the empty, carpeted hallway, let go of my hair, and immediately began smoothing down the wrinkles in his expensive suit jacket like he had not just gone full backyard brawl on his younger brother. "I told you not to make a scene, Gavin," he hissed, spitting the words at my feet. Then he turned on his heel and walked right back into the party to receive his award. I sat there on the cold hallway floor for a long, agonizing second, stunned and utterly humiliated. Then, using the wall for support, I pushed myself up onto shaky legs and stumbled into the nearby men's restroom. That was where you found me at the beginning of this video, staring into the mirror under the harsh overhead lights, watching my lip bleed onto the sink. But my heart was not broken anymore. The sadness was completely gone, replaced by something much stronger, much older, and far more dangerous. It was the cold, calculated focus of a soldier. I pulled my smartphone out of my pocket with trembling hands. My thumb hovered over my contact list. I almost deleted every single family member right then and there, but I stopped myself. I needed to be smart. I tapped on a name I knew I could trust with my life. I tapped on Miles. To truly understand why my brother thought he could drag me by my hair without a single consequence, you have to understand the house we grew up in. Our family lived in a pristine, affluent suburban neighborhood just outside of Denver, Colorado. It was the kind of neighborhood where the homeowners association would send you a formal fine if your lawn grass was a quarter-inch too high, and where every single driveway parked a luxury vehicle. My parents were obsessed with appearances, and from the day he was born, Preston was their chosen prince. Preston was the golden child who could do absolutely no wrong. When he graduated from his private high school, my parents did not just throw him a massive party. They bought him a brand new, cherry red Ferrari to drive to his Ivy League college classes. His college fund was massive, funded by my grandfather's substantial inheritance, ensuring he would never have to work a single day of part-time labor. Every single Thanksgiving dinner was an hour-long lecture from my mother about Preston's brilliant future, his incredibly high salary expectations, and how he was going to elevate the Blake family name into the upper echelons of the Colorado elite. And then there was me. I was the ghost of the family. I was the younger brother who did not care about corporate real estate portfolios or tech startups. I preferred fixing old trucks, running track, and reading history books. While Preston's achievements were framed and hung in the main living room, my report cards were tucked away in a kitchen drawer. When I turned 18, my mother calmly informed me that the remaining portion of the family college fund had been reallocated to Preston's master's degree, because he was the one with real potential. I did not complain. I did not file for a bitter family divorce. Instead, I walked right into the local recruiting office, signed my name on the dotted line, and joined the United States Marine Corps. I wanted to earn my own path, far away from the stifling hypocrisy of a home that measured a human being's worth by their bank account balance or the brand of the car they drove. When I left for boot camp, my parents did not even drive me to the airport. My dad said he had an important HOA meeting he could not miss, and my mom just handed me a $20 bill from Walmart and told me to make sure I did not get my uniform dirty. Preston did not even bother to wake up to say goodbye. He was too busy sleeping off a hangover from a country club party the night before. For the next 10 years, I built a life out of grit, sweat, and discipline. I deployed to places that my brother could not find on a map. I bled for my country, I lost good friends, and I earned my rank through sheer, unyielding hard work. My military salary was modest compared to Preston's tech funding, but every single dollar was clean, earned through sacrifice. I thought that by proving my independence, my family would eventually respect me. I thought that when I became a decorated Marine, they would look at me at least once with a shred of pride. I was incredibly wrong. Every time I called home from a deployment, my mother would cut my stories short to tell me about Preston's new luxury condo or how he was planning to buy a Porsche for his 31st birthday. My service was treated like an embarrassing little hobby, a charity case that they only mentioned to their wealthy neighbors when they wanted to look patriotic during the 4th of July weekend. So, when that gold-trimmed invitation arrived for Preston's Tech Pioneer Award Gala, A small, foolish part of my soul thought that maybe, just maybe, this was an olive branch. I thought that because I had just returned from a difficult 6-month rotation in Hawaii, they wanted me there to celebrate our mutual success as brothers. I spent half a week's paycheck on a last-minute flight, ironed my best clothes, and walked into that hotel room with an open heart. The reality hit me the moment I stepped into the Riverstone Hotel ballroom. The venue was surrounded by high-end sports cars, including a sleek, dark blue Porsche parked right at the main entrance with a custom license plate that read RADRK. It was Preston's car, paid for by his new tech startup investors. Inside, the room was a sea of expensive jewelry, tailored tuxedos, and fake laughter. When my mother finally spotted me hugging the wall near the entrance, she did not hug me. She did not ask how my deployment was, or if I was sleeping well after the transition back to the mainland. She simply looked me up and down, frowned slightly at my lack of a designer watch, and whispered that I should try to mingle with the city council members to help Preston's local tax zoning request. "You look so thin, Gavin," she said, her voice completely hollow of any real maternal warmth. "You really should have worn a better suit. Preston's investors are very particular about who they associate with. We cannot have people thinking our family is struggling." I swallowed my pride, nodded, and walked toward the gift table to leave the restored photo. I already told you what happened next. The cold, calculated arrogance of my brother, the sharp sting of his fist against my jaw, and the agonizing humiliation of being dragged across the floor by my hair while 70 wealthy Americans watched in complete silence. As Preston dragged me past the main table, I remember looking up from the floor and seeing my father, Harrison, sitting quietly in his chair. He did not even stand up. He just looked down at his plate, completely avoiding my eyes, pretending he was fascinated by his steak. My mother just smiled her fake, beautiful smile, took a sip of her wine, and moved out of the way so her golden son could finish throwing out the trash. Sitting there on the cold bathroom floor, listening to the muffled sounds of applause through the walls, the illusion finally shattered. The boy who wanted his parents' love died on that marble floor. The Marine took over. I wiped the blood from my chin with a paper towel, stood up straight, and walked out of the hotel through the back service exit. I did not want to cause a scene in the lobby. I walked out into the freezing Colorado night air, my hands shaking so violently from the adrenaline that I nearly dropped my phone into a bush. I walked across the street to a dimly lit, 24-hour diner and slid into the furthest corner booth, pulling my hoodie up over my bruised face, keeping my back firmly against the wall. My thumb hovered over the contact for Miles True. Miles was a first lieutenant in legal support at Camp Pendleton. We had done joint tactical training overseas years ago, and he was the closest thing I had to a real brother. The man had a moral compass made of solid concrete, and he knew the law like the back of his hand. More than that, he was a man who did not tolerate bullies. I hit the call button. He picked up on the very second ring. "Gavin." His voice came through the speaker, calm, clipped, and sharp as a razor. "What is the status?" I tried to answer him, but my throat tightened up so badly I could barely breathe. I had to take 3 deep breaths through my nose, forcing myself to maintain control so I would not break down like a wounded kid in the middle of a public diner. I was a Marine. I was not going to cry over people who did not deserve my tears. "I need your help, Miles," I finally managed to choke out, my voice raspy and low. Miles did not ask any stupid questions. He did not ask if I was okay, or what happened to my voice. He heard the underlying tone of emergency, and his military training instantly kicked in. "Where exactly are you right now, Gavin?" he asked. I rattled off the name and address of the diner across the street from the Riverstone Hotel. There was a brief pause on the line as I heard him grabbing his keys and his jacket. "I am 20 minutes away, Gavin. Stay put. Keep your head down. I am coming." While I waited in that booth, staring at the flickering neon sign outside the window, every single time I blinked, I saw that glittering crystal chandelier. I heard the roaring applause for Preston, and then that dead, heavy silence that filled the room when his fist hit my face. The physical pain in my jaw was starting to set in, a dull, throbbing ache that radiated up to my ear, but it was nothing compared to the absolute coldness growing in my chest. The worst part of the entire night was not the physical punch. It was the silent approval. It was the way my own flesh and blood looked at an act of violence and decided it was completely acceptable because it protected their precious corporate narrative. They thought because I was the quiet younger brother, because I had spent a decade obeying military orders, I would just swallow this humiliation, pack my bags, and disappear back to my base like a good little soldier. They were banking on my silence to keep their perfect world spinning. But as I watched the headlights of a car pull into the diner parking lot, I knew they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. They had treated a Marine like an enemy, and they were about to find out exactly what happens when you bring a war to a man who knows how to fight it. When Miles True walked into that diner, he did not make a dramatic entrance. He was a tall, broad-shouldered guy with a sharp military fade, wearing a simple leather jacket. He scanned the room once, spotted me in the back corner booth, gave a single sharp nod, and slid into the seat directly across from me. He took one look at my face, clocking the heavy swelling along my jawline, the dark purple bruise already forming under my left eye, and the way I was subtly holding my ribs on the right side. He did not curse. He did not raise his voice. He just looked me dead in the eyes, his jaw locked tight, and said 4 words. "What do you need?" That simple question, devoid of pity or useless sympathy, cleared away the last of the emotional fog in my brain. I leaned forward, my voice low and fierce, and I told him every single detail of what had happened inside that ballroom. I told him about Preston's insults, the physical punch, the hair dragging, and how our mother had literally stepped aside with a smile on her face to let it happen. Miles listened to the entire story without interrupting a single time. His knuckles turned completely white against the laminated surface of the diner table, and a small muscle in his cheek twitched with a dangerous intensity. When I finally finished speaking and went quiet, he reached into his pocket, pulled out a small notepad, and set a pen down. "You are a Marine, Gavin," Miles said, his voice dropping into that calm, terrifyingly professional legal tone. "We do not handle this with our fists in a parking lot. That is what amateurs do. We handle this by systematically destroying everything they value using the full weight of the law. You mentioned that Preston has been using your active duty status for something. Tell me exactly what you know." I took a sip of the hot black coffee the waitress had left for us, wincing as the liquid hit my split lip. A few months ago, while I was deployed in a high-security zone in Hawaii, Preston had sent me an urgent email asking for a scan of my military identification card and my recent deployment orders. He claimed that our mother needed them for a specialized family real estate insurance policy update. I was in the middle of an intensive operational rotation, distracted, sleep-deprived, and completely trustful of a routine family request. I scanned the documents, hit send, and never thought about it again. But 3 weeks ago, right before my deployment ended, I received a strange, automated notification from a military-friendly fintech banking institution based out of Utah. It was a credit flag, stating that a commercial business loan application submitted under my name had been approved for processing. I had assumed it was a system glitch or a clerical error, but in the chaos of returning to the mainland, I had not had the chance to dig into it. Miles stared at me, his eyes narrowing to slits. "A fintech loan? In your name? While you were out of the country?" I nodded slowly, my teeth grinding together. "Yes." And tonight, right before Preston hit me, he bragged about how his new startup company, Radiant Arc, had just secured a massive round of capital backing because of their deep connections to the veteran community. He literally told his investors that his company was built on the backs of military discipline. Miles reached for his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. "We need a professional bloodhound for this, Gavin. Someone who can track money through a brick wall. I am calling Dorian Finch." "Who is Dorian Finch?" I asked, watching him dial a number. "Dorian is a former senior criminal investigator for the IRS," Miles explained, waiting for the call to connect. "The guy retired early because he got sick of the government bureaucracy, but he tracks corporate fraud the way a sniper tracks a target." If your brother has been messing around with federal military financial benefits or laundering money under your social security number, Dorian will find the digital footprints within an hour. The call connected, and Miles spoke for less than 2 minutes, giving Dorian my full name, my military identification number, and a brief summary of the situation. He hung up, looked across the table at me, and stood up from the booth. "Dorian is waiting for us at his place in Aurora," Miles said. "Let us go." We drove through the freezing, empty highways in Miles's truck. The interior smelled like strong black coffee and pine air freshener. I leaned my head back against the headrest, closing my eyes as the steady hum of the engine acted as a strange sedative for my throbbing head. This was no longer just about a family dispute over a Thanksgiving dinner. This was a tactical operation. Dorian Finch lived in a quiet, incredibly ordinary residential neighborhood near Aurora. The houses were all identical, with spotless mailboxes and matching garbage bins, the kind of place where people went to disappear into a peaceful retirement. But the moment the front door of the house opened, I realized Dorian was anything but ordinary. He stood on the porch barefoot, despite the freezing temperature, holding a ceramic coffee mug with a badly broken handle. He was wearing a faded gray t-shirt that read, "Death by Audit." He had dark circles under his sharp eyes, looking like a man who had not slept a full night since the 90s, but his gaze was as sharp as a surgical scalpel. "You must be Gavin," Dorian said, stepping back to let us inside. Come in, come in. Don't waste time. I have already pulled your preliminary public financial records while you guys were driving over here." I froze mid-step in his hallway, staring at him. "You what? We just called you 20 minutes ago." Dorian shrugged carelessly, leading us into a kitchen that had been completely transformed into a high-tech command center. There were 3 massive computer monitors glowing in the dark, surrounded by stacks of paper folders and empty energy drink cans. "Miles texted me your full legal name and date of birth while he was starting the truck," Dorian said, sliding into a squeaky office chair. "I ran a basic identity scan through the military credit databases. You currently have 3 separate active credit lines open under your social security number. Gavin. 2 of them I would expect for a Marine officer, your government travel card and your personal auto loan. But the third one is fishy as hell." He clicked his mouse rapidly, opening up a series of massive, color-coded spreadsheets that looked like a foreign language to me. "Tell me everything about your brother's company." "Radiant Arc," Dorian commanded, his eyes reflecting the blue light of the monitors. I sat down at the kitchen table, laying out everything I knew. I told him about the scanned military documents I had emailed to Preston from Hawaii, the automated credit flag from the Utah FinTech Bank, and Preston's sudden influx of venture capital money that allowed him to buy a brand new Ferrari and a luxury condo in downtown Denver. Dorian's fingers flew across his keyboard like a concert pianist. Within 5 minutes, he let out a low, dark whistle that made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. "Well, your brother is certainly ambitious, Gavin, but he is also incredibly sloppy," Dorian said, spinning one of the massive monitors around so Miles and I could see the screen. "Look right here. 10 months ago, an application was filed with a military-friendly fintech institution in Salt Lake City for a specialized veteran-owned business startup loan. The amount? $180,000. The primary applicant listed on the federal paperwork? Gavin Blake, active-duty United States Marine." I stared at my own social security number, my own military rank, and my own digital signature emblazoned across a fraudulent federal loan document. "The recipient account for that $180,000, Dorian continued, pointing his pen at a line of code, is a registered limited liability company owned entirely by Preston Blake, doing business under the trade name Radiant Arkansas. Gavin, your brother completely forged your legal signature on a federal financial document. It is a terrible job, honestly. The digital metadata timestamps do not match your deployment location at all. It is absolute amateur hour." A cold, heavy weight settled deep into my stomach. I was not even angry anymore. The anger had completely burned away, leaving behind a frozen, unyielding landscape of absolute certainty. "Preston is arrogant, but he is not stupid," I said, my voice sounding incredibly flat and distant. He wouldn't just submit a forged document to a federal lender without knowing it would pass. He must have had help from the inside. Oh, he absolutely did, Dorian agreed, nodding his head enthusiastically as he pulled up another document. This kind of high-level identity fraud does not get approved through a compliance department without an internal enabler looking the other way. Someone at that fintech institution was either heavily bribed or completely blackmailed to push this through without verifying your active duty status. And they left massive digital footprints all over the server. Miles leaned his heavy frame against the kitchen counter, crossing his arms over his chest, his face dark with fury. So what is our next operational step, Dorian? Dorian turned back to his keyboard, his eyes gleaming with the excitement of a hunter closing in on his prey. I am going to keep digging into these corporate banking ledgers. But you, Gavin, you need to immediately secure your official military records. You need to file an emergency identity theft flag with the Department of Veterans Affairs and the Department of Defense. Once we place that federal flag on your profile, Preston will be completely locked out from using your credentials for another single dime. I looked at the screen, watching my identity being traded like a commodity to fund my brother's luxury lifestyle. Can he actually go to federal prison for this, Dorian? I asked. Dorian let out a cold, sharp chuckle. For wire fraud? For identity theft directly tied to active-duty federal military status? Oh, absolutely. He is looking at serious felony charges. But the real question is, Gavin, do you want this to be a quiet civil lawsuit? Or do you want to hand him over to the federal prosecutors and watch his entire life completely shatter? I did not answer him right away. I stood up from the table, walked over to the kitchen window, and looked out into the dark, silent Colorado night. For my entire life, Preston had rewritten the narrative of our family. He was the hero, the genius, the successful son, while I was the invisible shadow. Now, he had used the United States government and my own military service to fund his multimillion-dollar fairy tale. He was banking on my silence, betting his entire career that my military discipline and my desire to protect the family from embarrassment would keep me quiet. He had made a fatal bet. I turned back to Miles and Dorian, my eyes completely hollow of mercy. I do not want a quiet settlement, I said, each word dropping like a stone. I do not want a private apology at a family dinner, and I do not care about saving face. I want his entire company exposed to the light of day. I want him out of my life, and I want him to face every single consequence he has earned. Miles gave me a slow, proud nod, his jaw tightening. Good, he said, because you are a Marine, Gavin, and we are about to go to war. By 8 o'clock the next morning, I had slept exactly 0 hours. I was sitting on the floor of Miles's guest bedroom, surrounded by printed financial folders, loan documents, and corporate filings like I was back in a tactical planning room prepping for an overseas operation. My jaw was incredibly sore, a dull, constant throb that served as a physical reminder of why I was doing this. Miles walked into the room, holding 2 large mugs of strong black coffee, and tossed his tablet computer onto my lap. Your brother is already up and active on social media, Gavin, Miles said, his voice dripping with disgust. He is already controlling the narrative. I opened the link on the screen. Preston had posted a high-resolution selfie from the front seat of his luxury Porsche just an hour ago. He looked completely immaculate, his hair perfectly styled, wearing a gray cashmere turtleneck. The caption read, "Grateful for a spectacular night celebrating leadership and innovation with true visionaries. True strength means never letting petty, toxic drama slow down the mission. Keeping my eyes firmly on the future. Hashtag Women in Tech, hashtag Veteran Support, hashtag Radiant Arc." The post already had over 2,000 likes, and right at the very top of the comment section was a response from our mother, Beatrice. It read, "So incredibly proud of you, my beautiful golden boy. Keep shining bright and ignoring the darkness." I did not feel a single spark of anger when I read those words. All I felt was a cold, clinical sense of calculation. He is trying to get ahead of the story, I murmured, handing the tablet back to Miles. He knows I left the hotel bleeding, and he is trying to paint me as the unstable, dramatic younger brother. He wants everyone to think that if I speak out, it is just because I am jealous of his massive corporate salary and his college fund. Let him play his games, Miles said, taking a sip of his coffee. Because at 8:22 this morning, Dorian Finch found the smoking gun. Dorian called us on a secure video line just a few minutes later, his face glowing with triumph from his basement office. You guys need to look at this bank ledger I just unearthed from a shell company registered in Delaware, Dorian said, sharing his screen. Over the last 3 months, Preston has authorized 4 massive financial transfers, totaling nearly $60,000, out of the Radiant Arc corporate account. The line item listed them as operational consulting fees. But guess who owns that Delaware shell company? Preston Blake himself. He is laundering the fraudulent fintech loan money directly into his personal offshore bank account in the Cayman Islands. It is classic corporate embezzlement. But that is not even the biggest problem for your brother, Dorian continued, leaning in close to his camera. I just accessed the official speaker roster for the National Women in Federal Innovation Conference happening next month in Washington, D.C. Preston is featured on the main marketing flyer as the keynote speaker. His lecture title? From Deployment to Disruption, How Military Discipline Built a Tech Empire. The promotional bio claims that he spent years working as a high-level logistics consultant for the Department of Defense and that his company was co-founded by an active-duty Marine hero. My teeth clamped together so hard my bruised jaw flared with pain. He never deployed, I said through clenched teeth. He has never even stepped foot on a military base in his entire life. The closest he ever got to the military was watching a movie on his couch. He is not just exploiting your identity anymore, Gavin, Miles said, his voice deadly serious. This is full-on public impersonation and stolen valor. He is selling your sacrifice, your sweat, and your deployments to wealthy investors as a marketing prop for his brand. We knew we needed more than just digital financial spreadsheets to take down a media-trained CEO who had the full financial backing of my parents. We needed an insider witness, someone who had seen the rot inside Radiant Arc from the very beginning. Dorian spent the next hour running a background sweep on former employees of the company. It did not take long to find a massive anomaly. 6 months ago, the company's head of operations, a brilliant woman named Sylvia Thorne, had abruptly resigned from her position. There was no press release, no formal transition announcement, and her name had been completely scrubbed from the Radiant Arc website like she had never existed. But her personal LinkedIn profile contained a single, devastating sentence. Exited Radiant Arc due to severe ethical violations and corporate dishonesty. Miles managed to track down an encrypted email address for Sylvia, and we sent her a brief, direct message from a burner account. It read, Gavin Blake is an active-duty Marine. He just discovered the fraudulent fintech loan. We have the digital bank ledgers. We know about the stolen valor. We need to talk. Sylvia replied in less than 20 minutes with a time and an address for a small, secluded cafe located halfway between Boulder and Denver. When we walked into that cafe 2 hours later, Sylvia Thorne was already sitting in a corner booth. She was a sharp, professional woman in her late 30s, wearing a simple denim jacket and no makeup. She looked incredibly exhausted, carrying the heavy weight of someone who had spent months keeping a terrible secret. The moment her eyes landed on my face, she blinked in shock, staring at the heavy bruising on my jaw. You are the younger brother, she said, her voice shaking slightly as she gestured for us to sit down. The Marine. Yes, I said, sliding into the booth across from her. And my brother did this to me last night because I finally confronted him. Sylvia let out a long, ragged breath, covering her face with her hands for a second before looking back at me. Gavin, I am so incredibly sorry, she whispered. I should have spoken out months ago, but Preston threatened to use his high-priced lawyers to destroy my career with non-disclosure agreements and non-compete lawsuits if I ever open my mouth. Tell us what you saw inside that office, Sylvia, Miles urged, placing his legal notepad on the table. Sylvia reached into her purse, pulled out a sleek silver flash drive, and placed it gently on the white napkins between us. Everything you need is right here, Sylvia said, her voice growing stronger. This drive contains every single internal email thread, pitch deck edit, and financial meeting recording from my 8 months at that company. Preston did not just use your military identification for that loan, Gavin. He literally put your face in 2 separate venture capital slide decks. He called you his combat inspiration. He told Ansel Hayes and the other angel investors that he co-founded the company while writing letters to you while you were pinned down by enemy fire overseas. I let out a cold, hollow laugh. He barely even returned my text messages when I was overseas. It gets worse, Sylvia continued, her eyes fixed on mine. Coup twist foo 2. 2 months before I resigned, Preston tried to force me to alter corporate grant applications for veteran-owned business incentives. He wanted me to state that your father, Harrison Blake, was a highly decorated Navy SEAL officer who was acting as a senior advisor to the company. I stared at her in absolute disbelief. My father is an insurance salesman. He has never served a day in his life. I know, Sylvia said, nodding grimly. That was the exact moment I refused to comply. I told Preston that falsifying military service to obtain federal grant money was illegal and disgusting. He laughed in my face, told me that nobody in the tech world checks family backgrounds, and fired me on the spot, forcing me to sign a fraudulent termination agreement. He built his entire empire on a foundation of lies and stolen valor. Miles reached out and picked up the silver flash drive, his fingers gripping it tightly. You are a brave woman, Sylvia. This drive is exactly what we need to build our case. Are you willing to sign a formal legal deposition confirming these facts under oath? Sylvia did not flinch. She looked at my bruised face, looked at the uniform jacket Miles was wearing, and gave a firm, unyielding nod. I will sign whatever you need, she said. I am done letting that monster hide behind his PR agency. It is time for his show to end. Back at Miles's house, my mind was working with a cold, absolute military precision. I realized that if I tried to handle this through the standard slow-moving civil lawsuit channels, Preston's expensive lawyers would find a way to tie the case up in court for years, draining my modest salary until I had nothing left. I needed to deploy a tactical strike that his public relations team could not contain. I sat down at the laptop, opened a web browser, and purchased a basic domain name for $9. valorvtheft.com. It was a simple, stark website, just bold black text on a clean white background, devoid of any corporate design or fancy branding. Right at the very top of the homepage, I typed a single, devastating sentence. This is what it looks like when a civilian tech founder steals the identity of his active-duty Marine brother and calls it corporate empowerment. Beneath that sentence, I uploaded the raw, unedited PDF files of the fraudulent fintech loan application, the digital bank ledgers showing the transfers to the Cayman Islands, the pitch deck slides featuring my stolen military credentials, and a side-by-side comparison of my real deployment records against Preston's fabricated corporate timeline. I did not include a single word of emotional complaining. I just let the cold, hard receipts speak for themselves. I hit the publish button at exactly 7 o'clock that evening. I thought it would take a few days for people to notice the site. I thought we would have a quiet evening to prepare for the legal fallout. I was completely, incredibly wrong. By 7:35, the site tracker showed over 3,000 active hits. By midnight, a prominent user had shared the link on a massive online forum under the title, Prominent Tech Founder Fakes Military Service and Forges Marine Brother's Identity for Venture Capital Clout. The digital wildfire had officially been lit, and there was absolutely nothing Preston Blake could do to blow it out. The fallout from the website going live was immediate, absolute, and completely terrifying for anyone who had spent their entire life building a kingdom on a foundation of lies. I stayed awake with Miles in his home office, watching the site analytics climb from 3,000 visitors to over 50,000 by the time the sun finally began to rise over the Colorado mountains. The link had been shared across major veteran advocacy groups, tech watchdog forums, and several massive independent journalism platforms. Julian Boyd, an incredibly well-known independent investigative journalist who specializes in corporate fraud, had picked up the story and tweeted out the link to her massive audience. Her caption simply read that when stolen valor meets Silicon Valley greed, the public deserves to see the receipts before the high-priced public relations teams attempt to scrub the internet clean. I was never going to take those documents down. Not for anyone. Not for any amount of money. The first desperate attempt to silence me came precisely at 9 o'clock in the morning. My phone vibrated violently against the kitchen counter. The caller ID flashed my mother's name, Beatrice. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. It rang again. Then came a barrage of text messages, each one growing progressively more frantic, manipulative, and emotionally unhinged than the last. She started by demanding that I call her back immediately, claiming there was a terrible family emergency. When I ignored that transparent bait, she pivoted directly to guilt. She sent a massive block of text reminding me of all the sacrifices she supposedly made for me during my childhood. She actually had the absolute audacity to bring up my grandfather's inheritance and the college fund, claiming that the family had always intended to support my future, but my stubborn decision to join the military had forced them to reallocate the money to Preston's business ventures. Finally, when the guilt-tripping failed to produce a response, she resorted to pure, unfiltered anger. She accused me of trying to destroy the family legacy over a simple misunderstanding at a hotel party. She texted that I was acting like a bitter child, completely incapable of handling adult situations without throwing a public tantrum. I turned the phone face down, poured myself a second cup of black coffee, and watched the snow falling outside the window. 2 hours later, a heavy knock echoed through the house. A courier stood on the front porch holding a thick, rigid cardboard envelope requiring a direct signature. Inside was a formal cease and desist letter from Nathaniel Ward, one of the most expensive, aggressive, and ruthless corporate defense lawyers in the entire state of Colorado. The letter was a masterpiece of legal intimidation, printed on exceptionally heavy, watermarked bond paper. It threatened me with a multi-million-dollar defamation lawsuit, claiming my website had caused immediate, irreparable damage to Radiant Arc's corporate valuation and severely compromised their upcoming funding round. The document demanded the immediate removal of all digital materials, a public apology published on the homepage, and a mandatory mediation session to resolve the matter quietly before they took me to federal court and destroyed my entire financial future. Miles read the letter twice, sitting at his kitchen table, a slow, deeply satisfied grin spreading across his face. He tapped his pen against the thick parchment. "They are panicking, Gavin," Miles said, his voice dropping into that calm, analytical tone he used when dismantling an opponent's defense strategy. "They do not want to go to court because they know every single document on that website is completely authentic. Discovery would completely destroy them. They want to get you into a closed room, intimidate you with dense legal jargon, and force you to sign a non-disclosure agreement to bury the evidence forever. They are trying to stop the bleeding before their investors ask to see the real books." I looked at the legal threat, feeling that familiar, icy calm wash over me. I had faced hostile fire in foreign countries. I was not going to be intimidated by a man in a tailored suit wielding a fountain pen. "Then let us give them exactly what they want," I replied, staring at Nathaniel Ward's bold signature at the bottom of the page. "Let us go to the mediation. Let them think they have successfully intimidated the rogue younger brother." We scheduled the mediation for the very next afternoon. Nathaniel Ward chose a high-end, heavily fortified legal office in downtown Denver. It was the exact kind of building designed specifically to make you feel incredibly small, poor, and insignificant the moment you walked through the revolving glass doors. The lobby featured towering 50-foot ceilings, imported Italian marble floors that echoed loudly with every footstep, and a front reception desk carved from a single massive slab of polished mahogany. It was a space built entirely on the illusion of absolute power and limitless wealth. Miles and I arrived exactly 20 minutes early. I was wearing my formal Marine Corps service uniform. Every brass button was polished to a flawless mirror shine. My service ribbons were perfectly aligned across my chest, and my boots were immaculate. I was not walking into that building as a younger brother begging for an apology or seeking validation from a broken family. I was walking in as an active-duty serviceman defending his honor against a civilian who had mocked the very foundation of that service. Miles walked right beside me, wearing his own uniform, carrying a thick, black leather briefcase that contained the absolute destruction of Preston Blake. We were escorted by a silent legal assistant into a massive glass-walled conference room overlooking the sprawling Denver skyline. We sat down in complete silence, our backs perfectly straight, waiting for the trap to be sprung. 15 minutes later, the heavy glass doors swung open. Preston walked in first, flanked tightly by Nathaniel Ward. Preston was wearing a custom-tailored navy pinstripe suit, his hair perfectly styled, his expensive designer watch catching the overhead light. He carried an aura of absolute invincibility, completely failing to recognize the extreme danger he was currently standing in. Right behind him walked our mother, Beatrice. She was dressed in an expensive cream-colored designer suit, carrying a high-end leather handbag, looking exactly like a woman preparing to attend a charity luncheon or an exclusive real estate open house, rather than a vicious legal battle involving her two sons. She did not even look at me when she entered the room. She simply took a seat directly next to Preston, crossing her legs and carefully smoothing her skirt to ensure it did not wrinkle. The mediator, a neutral, stern-looking retired judge in his late 60s, sat at the head of the long table, but it was incredibly obvious who believed they were running this show. Mr. Blake, Nathaniel Ward began, opening a sleek leather folder and deliberately refusing to use my official military title. We are here today to offer you a very generous, extremely swift off-ramp from the disastrous legal path you have chosen to walk down. Your little internet stunt yesterday has caused a minor, temporary headache for my client's upcoming venture capital funding round. However, because my client values family harmony above all else, he is prepared to completely overlook the defamation, the severe breach of privacy, and the extreme emotional distress you have caused your mother, provided you agree to our specific terms today. Ward slid a thick, heavily bound stack of papers across the polished mahogany table until it stopped directly in front of me. It was a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. It was meticulously designed to legally gag me for the rest of my natural life. If you sign this document right now, Ward continued, leaning back in his expensive ergonomic leather chair and steepling his fingers, you agree to immediately transfer the domain ownership of your website to Radiant Arcs Holding Company. You agree to sign a sworn, legally binding affidavit stating that the documents you posted were either digitally doctored by a third party or fundamentally misunderstood by you. In exchange for your total cooperation, my client will not pursue devastating civil damages against your modest military salary, and he will generously authorize a one-time, tax-free settlement payment of $50,000 to help you transition into a quiet civilian life when your current military contract ends. I stared down at the paperwork. $50,000. They were literally trying to buy my silence, my honor, my trauma, and my stolen identity for less than a third of what Preston had fraudulently stolen using my name. They viewed my integrity as a cheap commodity that could be purchased to protect their massive corporate salary and their pristine suburban reputation. Before I could even speak a single word, my mother leaned forward, resting her perfectly manicured hands gracefully on the table. She looked at me with that exact same condescending, deeply disappointed expression she used to wear when I brought home a mediocre grade in middle school, or when I told her I did not want to attend her country club dinners. Gavin, please listen to reason, Beatrice sighed, her voice dripping with thick, artificial sympathy that made my stomach turn. Do not be incredibly stubborn about this. You have made your little point. You threw your tantrum on the internet. But you are playing dangerous games with real adult money now. Preston is building a massive legacy for this family, an empire that will eventually support all of us, including you, long after you are done playing soldier in the mud. Why do you always have to be so difficult? Why can you not just be happy for your brother's massive success? We are willing to let everything go, to welcome you back to the family table, if you just sign the paper. My jaw tightened instinctively. I looked at the woman who had brought me into this world, the woman who had stood in a ballroom just 2 nights ago and watched her oldest son punch me in the face, drag me across a marble floor by my hair, and humiliate me in front of 70 people without lifting a single finger to intervene. You actually think this is a tantrum? I asked, my voice dangerously low, perfectly steady, and completely devoid of any familial warmth. He committed federal wire fraud, mother. He stole my military identity while I was deployed in a high-security zone to secure a federal loan he never qualified for. He lied to extremely powerful investors about his background. That is a federal crime, not a family disagreement. Preston let out a loud, mocking laugh, shaking his head side to side, as if he were dealing with a wildly imaginative toddler. "Oh, come on, Gavin," he sneered, leaning heavily against the table, his eyes flashing with utter contempt. "You are being completely dramatic, as always. Nobody cares about the boring paperwork. Tech companies bend the rules all the time to secure early-stage capital. The investors do not care about some minor technicality on a banking application. They care about the vision. I took a piece of paper, and I turned it into a multi-million-dollar valuation. I am creating actual jobs. I am creating immense wealth." He pointed a manicured finger directly at the center of my chest, his face twisting into an ugly mask of raw, unfiltered arrogance. "You think that uniform means something out here in the real world? You think those little colorful medals on your chest give you power in this room? You are nothing but a disposable government employee, Gavin. You take orders. I give them. I built an empire, and you are just incredibly angry because you will spend the rest of your miserable life taking a mediocre salary to march around in the dirt, while I change the world." Nathaniel Ward cleared his throat loudly, attempting to rein in his client's aggressive outburst, but Preston was completely consumed by his own massive ego. The trap of his own arrogance had finally sprung wide open, and he was walking blindly right into the absolute center of it, totally unaware that the ground beneath his feet was already gone. "Sign the paper right now," Gavin, Preston commanded, his voice echoing loudly off the thick glass walls of the conference room. "Sign the NDA, take the $50,000, and go back to your pathetic base. Because if you do not, I will personally instruct Nathaniel to bury you in so much relentless litigation that you will be spending your retirement money on legal fees before you even turn 40. We will take your car, your meager savings, and whatever pathetic little life you have managed to build for yourself. We will crush you." Miles sat perfectly still beside me, his hands resting calmly on the handle of his briefcase. He did not say a single word. He did not need to. He just waited for me to make the final call. I reached out, placed my right hand firmly flat on top of the massive stack of non-disclosure documents, and slowly pushed them back across the smooth mahogany table until they hit the base of Preston's coffee cup. "I am not signing a single page of your garbage," I said, looking directly into my brother's terrified eyes. "And I am absolutely not taking your dirty money." The second I pushed those documents back across the table, Preston lost whatever tiny shred of media-trained composure he had left. He slammed both of his hands violently onto the mahogany surface, the sudden, explosive sound echoing like a gunshot in the pristine, quiet conference room. He stood up abruptly, his chair scraping harshly against the floor, leaning entirely over the table until his face was just inches from mine. His features were twisted into an ugly, terrifying mask of pure, unrestrained rage. The polished, elegant CEO persona completely shattered into a million pieces, revealing the spoiled, vicious, completely unhinged child buried underneath. "You pathetic, ungrateful loser," Preston shouted, completely ignoring his lawyer's urgent, panicked attempt to pull him back down into his seat by his jacket sleeve. "You think you are some kind of untouchable hero? You think anyone in the real corporate world actually cares about your deployments or your sacrifice? Your military service does not make you special, Gavin. Your service does not make you interesting. It just makes you tired and poor. You are nothing but a glorified, underpaid security guard, and you are trying to destroy my entire life out of pure, pathetic jealousy because you know you will never achieve a fraction of what I have built." I did not flinch. I did not blink. I did not even lean back in my chair. I just sat there in my uniform, absorbing his toxic venom like a solid stone wall absorbing the rain. I let him scream until his face turned a dark, unhealthy shade of purple. I let him yell until he ran completely out of breath. I let his true, vile character be permanently recorded in the detailed notes of the neutral mediator sitting silently at the head of the table. When the room finally fell dead quiet, leaving only the sound of Preston's heavy, ragged, angry breathing, I slowly reached inside the breast pocket of my uniform jacket. I did not rush. I pulled out a single, thin manila folder. I did not toss it aggressively across the table. I simply slid it gently over the polished wood until it rested directly in front of Nathaniel Ward. "You should really look at that document, Mr. Ward," I said, my voice completely devoid of emotion, sharp and cold as a winter morning. "Because your client is currently living in a severe delusion, and you are legally and ethically obligated to inform him of reality before he incriminates himself any further in this room." Ward gave me a highly suspicious, guarded look. He adjusted his expensive designer glasses, carefully opened the manila folder, and looked down at the top page. The first document bore the massive, unmistakable official seal of the Department of Defense. The second page, directly beneath it, carried the heavy seal of the United States Internal Revenue Service Criminal Investigation Division. As the highly paid, arrogant corporate lawyer read the dense legal text, I watched the color completely and totally drain from his face. His confident, relaxed posture collapsed in an instant. He swallowed hard, a visible gulp of pure panic, his eyes darting frantically back and forth across the page, reading the same paragraph a second time just to make absolutely sure he was not hallucinating the nightmare in front of him. "What is it, Nathaniel?" my mother demanded, her voice suddenly shrill with deep anxiety, sensing the massive shift in the room's energy. "Read it out loud. Tell him we are not intimidated by his fake, printed military papers. Tell him we will proceed with the lawsuit." Ward did not answer her. He could not even look at her. He slowly closed the folder, pushed his heavy leather chair back from the table, and looked up at Preston as if my brother were a walking corpse infected with a deadly plague. "Preston," Ward said, his voice completely hollow, trembling slightly with a fear I had never heard from a lawyer before, "I need you to answer me honestly right now. Did you attempt to transfer $75,000 from your corporate operating account to a private banking institution in the Cayman Islands this morning at approximately 8 o'clock? Preston completely froze. His angry expression melted into absolute, deer-in-the-headlights terror. His eyes darted nervously between me, his lawyer, and the mediator. "That is standard corporate asset restructuring," he stammered, his voice cracking, instantly going on the defensive. "I was simply moving operational funds to secure a better international interest rate for the new venture capital injection. It is completely legal. I am the CEO. I can move the money wherever I want." "It is not legal when those specific assets are directly tied to an active, massive federal criminal investigation," Ward replied, his voice rising in panic, realizing his own law firm was dangerously close to the blast zone. I leaned forward, resting my forearms firmly on the table, and finally delivered the fatal, crushing blow I had been preparing for days. "You actually thought I was just sitting in a dark diner crying about my bruised face, Preston," I said, my voice carrying the full, unyielding weight of absolute truth. "You thought I was just a bitter kid building a little website to make you look bad at your next tech conference. But what you utterly failed to realize is that when you forge the digital signature of an active-duty United States Marine to secure a federally backed loan, it immediately stops being a petty family dispute. It instantly becomes a massive matter of national security and high-level federal fraud." I pointed a single finger directly at the folder sitting in front of the trembling lawyer. 4 hours ago, the Department of Defense Legal Division, working in direct conjunction with the IRS Criminal Investigation Unit, officially flagged your name, your social security number, and the entire corporate entity of Radiant Arc for high-level federal wire fraud, money laundering, and identity theft. I watched Preston's eyes widen in absolute, paralyzing terror as the horrific reality of his situation began to violently crash down around his shoulders. "Your assets are gone, Preston," I continued, enunciating every single word with deliberate, merciless precision. 2 hours ago, a federal judge granted an emergency global injunction. Every single bank account tied to your name, every corporate ledger under Radiant Arc, your personal checking accounts, and that little offshore Cayman Islands account you desperately tried to funnel money into this morning. They have all been completely frozen by the federal government. You cannot move a single dollar. You cannot sell your fraudulent company. You cannot even buy a cup of coffee using your corporate card right now. You are entirely locked out of your own life. Preston frantically reached into his tailored suit pocket, pulled out his smartphone, and desperately opened his high-end banking application. His fingers were shaking so violently, he dropped the phone onto the hard mahogany table twice before he could manage to unlock the screen. When the application finally loaded, a massive, bright red banner appeared directly across the top of his screen. It read, in bold white letters, "Account suspended. Contact federal authorities immediately." "No," Preston whispered, his voice incredibly small and weak, staring at the screen as if it were a live grenade about to detonate in his hands. "No, this is completely impossible. You cannot do this to me. I have major investors. I have the Women in Tech conference next month. I have payroll to meet. You cannot just freeze my life with a piece of paper." "I did not freeze your life, Preston," I replied coldly, staring right through him. "Your own massive greed did. You built a giant house out of stolen materials, and now the real owners have finally come to collect their debt." Nathaniel Ward immediately stood up, rapidly and frantically shoving his legal pads, his expensive pens, and his laptop back into his leather briefcase. He was moving with the chaotic, desperate energy of a man trying to escape a burning building before the roof collapsed. "Nathaniel, what on earth are you doing?" my mother cried out, reaching out across the table to grab his suit sleeve. "You have to fix this right now. You are his lawyer. We pay you a massive monthly retainer to handle these things. Do your job." Ward ripped his arm away from her frantic grasp as if she were carrying a highly infectious disease. "Mrs. Blake, my firm was retained specifically to handle a standard civil defamation dispute and basic corporate compliance. We do not, under any circumstances whatsoever, represent clients who are actively engaging in federal wire fraud, international money laundering, and the illegal transfer of restricted assets during an active, ongoing federal investigation. Attorney-client privilege does not protect ongoing criminal enterprises. If I stay in this room for one more minute, the FBI will indict me right alongside your son. I am formally withdrawing as your son's legal counsel, effective immediately. Good luck, Preston. You are going to need a very different kind of lawyer." Ward did not even look back as he practically sprinted out of the glass-walled conference room, leaving Preston completely and utterly abandoned by the shield of wealth he had relied on his entire life. My mother completely broke down. She burst into loud, ugly tears, covering her face with her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. But she was not crying because her son was a criminal. She was not crying out of remorse for how she had treated me. She was crying because the perfect, wealthy illusion she had spent decades meticulously cultivating was being violently destroyed in front of her eyes. She saw her country club memberships, her social status, and her pristine reputation evaporating into thin air, and there was absolutely no one left to blame. Preston sank slowly back into his chair, his hands gripping his perfectly styled hair, staring blankly at the mahogany table. The golden boy was completely broken. The arrogance was entirely gone, replaced by the crushing, suffocating realization that he was facing serious federal prison time, and his brilliant tech empire was nothing more than toxic dust. Miles stood up next to me, calmly buttoned his uniform jacket, and picked up his briefcase. "We are done here, Sergeant Blake," he said calmly, officially signaling the end of the operation. I stood up, adjusting my cover, and looked down at my broken family one last time. I did not feel angry anymore. I did not feel sad or vindictive. I just felt a profound, heavy sense of permanent closure. The ghost they had tried to bury for 30 years had just burned their entire fraudulent empire to the ground, and I was finally walking out of the ashes. Let's pause for a moment. Thank you for staying with me this far, you're truly amazing. Please help me by liking the video and commenting the number 1 below so I know you've been here with me until this point. This not only helps more people discover this story, but also lets me know that my experiences mean something to someone. Your support is the greatest motivation for me to keep sharing the rest of this journey. The total collapse of Radiant Arc did not happen slowly. It did not fade away over months of tedious legal battles. It happened with the terrifying, violent speed of a highly controlled demolition. When the federal freeze hit Preston's accounts, it instantly triggered a massive, automated domino effect across the entire financial sector of his business, exposing every single lie he had ever told to his investors. The very next morning, my cell phone rang loudly while I was carefully packing my military duffel bag in the guest bedroom at Miles's house. I was preparing to fly back to my base on the coast, my mission in Colorado fully accomplished. I checked the caller ID and saw an unknown number from a high-end California area code. I answered it, fully expecting another angry, weeping relative or a desperate journalist looking for an exclusive quote to publish in a tech blog. "Am I speaking directly to Sergeant Gavin Blake?" A deep, incredibly commanding voice asked. "Speaking," I replied, zipping up my bag. "This is Ansel Hayes," the voice said. I recognized the name immediately, and a cold chill ran down my spine. Ansel Hayes was the lead angel investor, the billionaire venture capitalist who had pumped millions of dollars into Radiant, Arkansas. He was the man Preston had been desperately trying to impress at the hotel gala just days earlier. "Sergeant Blake, I am a man who respects efficiency, so I will keep this very brief," Ansel said, his tone purely transactional and completely devoid of any corporate warmth. "I read the documents you posted on your website, and my elite forensic accounting team just verified the federal freeze on Radiant Ark's assets with our contacts in Washington. I wanted to personally call you and tell you that my firm is pulling every single cent of our financial backing immediately. We are also officially pursuing highly aggressive civil litigation against your brother for deliberately defrauding our board of directors. A massive lawsuit is being filed as we speak." I leaned against the bedroom doorframe, quietly listening to the wealthy investor methodically dismantle the last remaining pieces of my brother's life. "I appreciate the courtesy of the call, Mr. Hayes," I said. "But why are you telling me this directly? Why not just handle it through your new legal team?" "Because I absolutely despise liars," Ansel replied sharply, his voice practically vibrating with anger. "Your brother sat in my private office and looked me dead in the eye while he used your honorable military service as a cheap marketing prop. He told us he personally owned a massive fleet of company vehicles and multiple properties to prove his financial liquidity. Do you know what my private investigators found out at 3 o'clock this morning? That dark blue Porsche he parades around town to look successful? It is a high-mileage rental car leased under a fake subsidiary. That luxury condo he hosts his lavish parties in? It is leased entirely under the company's operating budget, bleeding our investment dry. He does not actually own a single thing. He is a complete, absolute fraud, Sergeant. We normally do not vet families. We fund founders. But we made a massive, embarrassing mistake with Preston, and we are going to ensure he never works in the tech sector or anywhere near a corporate salary ever again. Have a safe deployment, son." The line went completely dead. I slowly lowered the phone, shaking my head in quiet disbelief. A rented Porsche, a leased condo. My brother had destroyed his entire family, committed massive federal crimes, and punched me in the face just to protect a luxurious lifestyle he did not even actually own. He was a hollow shell of a man playing dress-up with other people's money. But the final, absolutely devastating nail in the coffin came from a completely unexpected direction later that afternoon. 2 days after the disastrous mediation, I received a highly encrypted message from Dorian Finch, the retired IRS investigator who had helped us uncover the bank ledgers. The massive, suffocating internal pressure of the federal IRS investigation had caused the criminal conspiracy to violently crack from the inside. Reese, the corrupt internal loan officer at the Utah fintech bank who had maliciously processed Preston's fraudulent loan using my stolen military identity, had panicked. Facing decades in federal prison for high-level financial conspiracy and wire fraud, Reese had immediately walked into the FBI field office in Salt Lake City and surrendered himself. He cut a comprehensive, devastating plea deal, handing over every single digital receipt, every deleted text message, and a damning audio recording of Preston explicitly bribing him with $20,000 to push the massive loan through without verifying my active deployment status. Reese flipped on Preston completely, securing full legal immunity for himself and guaranteeing a slam-dunk federal criminal indictment for my brother. The FBI literally raided the Radiant Arc offices that very afternoon, carrying out boxes of hard drives and printed documents. Later that exact same evening, as I was sitting at the crowded airport departure gate, waiting for my delayed flight out of Denver, my laptop chimed loudly with a new email notification. It was from my mother. The subject line simply read, "Please read this." I opened the email. It was a long, rambling, desperately pathetic wall of text, completely devoid of any actual accountability. "Gavin, please," the email read, "please tell your military lawyers to drop this entirely. You have completely ruined him. The billionaire investors are gone. The federal IRS agents are literally standing in our living room right now questioning your father about his insurance business, and Preston is having a total, severe mental breakdown in his bedroom. Please don't destroy your your brother. Please think about the bigger picture of this family. We are on the verge of a terrible divorce because your father blames me for everything. We are family. Family protects each other. We were going to give you part of the grandfather's inheritance eventually. You just had to be patient. You have made your point. If you have any heart left in you at all, you will call that journalist and tell her it was a massive misunderstanding. We will forgive you. We can fix this together." I read those incredibly toxic words twice, feeling absolutely nothing inside my chest. No anger, no sadness, just a cold emptiness. The emotional manipulation was so incredibly transparent it was almost deeply insulting. She was still desperately trying to protect the golden child. Even while armed federal agents were standing in her pristine living room digging through her life, she was demanding that I fall on my sword to save a man who had treated me like garbage my entire life. She actually had the nerve to offer me her forgiveness for a crime I did not commit. She threatened me with her impending divorce. She dangled a fake inheritance over my head like I was a starving dog begging for scraps. I did not reply to her. I did not type out an angry, emotional response or try to logically explain my feelings to a woman incapable of understanding them. I simply hit the print to PDF button, creating a permanent, time-stamped digital copy of her admission that she was actively attempting to intimidate and interfere with a federal witness. I forwarded the digital copy directly to the lead federal prosecutor handling Preston's criminal case. Then, I permanently blocked her email address, deleted her phone number from my contacts entirely, and closed my laptop with a satisfying click. I boarded my flight, walked quietly down the narrow aisle to my assigned seat, and looked out the small scratched window as the plane finally lifted off the runway, leaving the freezing, toxic, broken landscape of Colorado far behind me. I was finally truly free from the chains of my bloodline. 8 months later, the hot, incredibly humid air of the southern coastal base hit my face as I stepped out of the heavy glass doors of the military recruitment office. I took a deep, grounding breath, feeling the heavy, familiar, and comforting weight of the military environment all around me. The sound of boots marching in the distance, the sharp commands echoing across the training yard. It was the sound of real discipline. A lot can drastically change in 8 months when the toxic truth is finally exposed to the harsh light of reality. Radiant Arc is completely, undeniably dead. The company was entirely wiped from the public corporate registry. The federal courts moved with terrifying, merciless speed once they had Reese's audio confession and Sylvia's sworn deposition regarding the fake Navy SEAL claims. The judge presiding over the case, a strict, no-nonsense woman named Judge Margaret Brooks, who happened to be a former military logistics officer herself, showed absolutely zero mercy in her courtroom. During the sentencing hearing, she publicly lambasted Preston, stating on the official record that stealing the honor of an active-duty serviceman for cheap corporate greed was one of the most disgusting, cowardly acts of fraud she had seen in her entire extensive legal career. Preston completely folded under the pressure. He pleaded guilty to federal wire fraud and aggravated identity theft to avoid a massive, highly publicized trial that would have likely put him away for 20 years. He was legally ordered to pay back every single dollar he stole, including massive, crushing federal fines that completely bankrupted whatever hidden, dirty money he had left. Right now, my former golden boy brother is living in a dusty, incredibly hot, miserable desert town in Arizona, hiding out under a slightly modified legal name, working as a low-level shift manager at a mid-level retail electronics store. There are no expensive tailored suits, no rented dark blue Porsches, and absolutely no exclusive venture capital galas. Just the grinding, exhausting reality of a life he finally earned through his own actions. My parents' marriage completely fractured and collapsed under the immense strain of the federal investigation and the total loss of their social standing. The intense social shame in their pristine, judgmental suburban neighborhood was simply too much for them to bear. The neighbors who used to attend their lavish parties suddenly stopped calling. My mother, Beatrice, was forced to put the massive family home on the real estate market at a massive loss just to cover Preston's exorbitant legal defense fees. She moved into a small, entirely unremarkable apartment on the outskirts of town. Permanently exiled from the wealthy country club social circles she valued far more than the lives of her own children. The divorce was finalized 2 months ago, acting as a miserable, quiet funeral for a family that never truly existed in the first place. As for me, my life moved in a completely different, much brighter direction. After the exhaustive federal investigation fully cleared my name and validated my actions, the military chain of command recognized the intense stress, the unyielding integrity, and the positive media spotlight my case had generated for the core values of the armed forces. They offered me a specialized, highly sought-after reassignment, bringing me back to the mainland permanently. I proudly accepted a promotion to a position as a senior Marine Corps recruiter and mentorship coordinator at a major, high-volume training facility on the coast. I now spend my days working directly with young men and women who are standing exactly where I stood 10 years ago. Scared kids looking for a real purpose, looking for a way out of violently broken homes, looking for a true family that values strict discipline, honor, and loyalty over bank accounts and fake social status. Just yesterday afternoon, I sat across from a young, highly driven female ROTC student named Maya. She was 19 years old, fierce, incredibly smart, but deeply struggling with the heavy, suffocating expectations of a wealthy family that wanted her to abandon her military dreams. They wanted her to quit the program and join their massive local real estate business, threatening to cut off her college fund and her future inheritance if she refused to comply with their demands. She looked at me across my metal desk, her eyes filled with deep doubt and anxiety, and asked me if the massive sacrifice of serving was actually worth it. She asked me if the uniform could ever truly replace the family you inevitably have to leave behind. I looked at Maya, and in my mind, I vividly remembered the freezing cold marble floor of the Riverstone Hotel. I remembered the sharp, metallic taste of blood from my split lip, the agonizing pain in my scalp, and the silent, complicit, terrifying smile of my mother watching me get destroyed. The military will never completely replace your biological family, Maya, I told her, keeping my voice incredibly honest, grounded, and devoid of any cheap recruitment slogans. The military is a job. It is a hard, brutal, incredibly exhausting job that will test every single limit you have. But what this uniform will absolutely do is teach you exactly what true loyalty looks like in the darkest moments. It will teach you that a person's real value is not inherited from a grandfather's trust fund, and it is certainly not bought with a fraudulent corporate loan. Real value is forged in the intense fire of accountability. You do not ever have to set yourself on fire just to keep toxic people warm, even if you happen to share their last name. You can build your own brilliant legacy entirely on your own terms. She nodded slowly, a bright spark of genuine determination lighting up in her eyes, the heavy weight of her family's expectations finally falling away. That is the exact moment I realized exactly why I had to go through everything I did with Preston and Beatrice. I survived that horrific betrayal so I could sit in this chair, wear this rank, and guide the next generation of fighters toward the light. I am Senior Sergeant Gavin Blake. I am the son of no false legacy, and I am the brother to no toxic illusion. I am exactly who I built myself to be, brick by difficult brick. Have you ever faced something similar with your own family? Have you ever had to draw a massive, hard line in the sand and walk completely away from the people who were supposed to love you the most, just to protect your own peace, your sanity, and your true identity? Share your story in the comments below, and don't forget to absolutely smash that like button and subscribe so you don't miss the next journey. Stay incredibly strong, violently protect your boundaries, and never, ever let anyone make you feel like a ghost in your own spectacular life.